So today we're going to do the handover video on this Trigano Tribute 550. We're going to start on the outside and then we're going to move on to the inside. I'd firstly like to start off the video by explaining the vehicle hasn't had a valet as of yet, and there's a couple of bits that are still to be done on PDI, but I just wanted to get this video out to you just in time for your collection. So as I mentioned, we'll start on the outside and we'll start by going over to the passenger side. You'll notice at the passenger side you've got your fill-up points. Open up the flap, you've got your fill-up point for your diesel, which is just in there, and opening up the passenger door you will notice that you've got your bonnet release catch here. I'll pull that to release the bonnet. We'll go underneath there just shortly. Two more things to point out: you've got your tyre pressures, which are just in the door sill here on the passenger side, and on all your windows in the front cab you can see that you've got rhombus cab lines that simply slide out and connect via the magnetic strip. You've got the same again on the front window. All you'll need to do is simply push these little tabs down and push this one down as well, just to free the blind, and they connect up and meet in the middle where the wing mirror is, where the rear view mirror is, and that will black out the entire cab. Now, when taking these back in, just bear in mind just to lead from the bottom, as they are quite delicate. If you get them twisted or anything, they could potentially break. And as a rule of thumb with anything in a motorhome, if it feels like it's being forced, you're probably doing something wrong. So just take your time with it and bear in mind not to force anything. And they just clip in like so, and then you're good to go. And underneath the bonnet, there's not many things that you need to know underneath here. The main thing being that if you're ever jump starting the vehicle, you've got your positive terminal, which is just located underneath this cap, as indicated by the plus sign. So your positive terminal can go onto there, and your negative terminal just connects onto this nipple here at the front. So that's if you're jump starting the motorhome. Just to point out a couple more things, you can then see that you've got your engine oil here along with your dipstick, which is below that. And then up at the top you've got your brake disc fluid, your engine coolant, your power steering fluid, and then finally in the corner you've got your washer fluid for the front windscreen. Moving on from the bonnet and going round to the other side of the vehicle, you'll notice that you've got a flap here. Opening up this will gain you access to the water tank, and this is where you can fill up your fresh water. Now, as you can see, once this is open up, like I mentioned, you can fill up the fresh water tank. Now, you'll need a specialised hose fitting that will connect into here. I believe it's with the vehicle. That will then slot into here, and then that hose fitting will then just connect up to your tap on site. You can then turn your fresh water on, and that will fill up the fresh water. So it's dead easy and dead simple. You'll notice that you've also got this little point here which says out, so you can turn it and remove this. This is actually a filter. I don't really recommend you drinking out of the freshwater tank, so to be perfectly honest, there's no real need for you to take this filter out, and this is just to stop debris and everything getting into the freshwater tank. But due to the fitting of what it is, where you need a special hose to connect it in, there shouldn't be any debris that ends up in the freshwater tank. But like I mentioned, I personally wouldn't drink out of it, but if you're washing up and you're boiling it, you're absolutely fine. Now, next up, you've then got your Truma vent. All you've got to do to remove this is pull up on the underside and remove the vent. You need to remove this when you are operating the hot water in the motorhome, but when you're travelling, this cover needs to be on. If you take this off and you travel with the vent off, you do run the risk of getting dirt and muck onto the inside of the vent itself, which could then clog up the vent and cause it to have an issue, potentially having it to gas out the system. So with that in mind, when you're travelling, always have this on, and when you're stationary and using the boiler for your hot water, this needs to come off. Dead simple. It can get quite hot, this, bear in mind, so give it a bit of a wide berth. You don't want to be obviously hanging anything on there, so just be mindful. Underneath there directly, is your is your wastewater tank, and this brings us on to your first drain down point in the vehicle. You've got three main drain down points in the motorhome. You've got your fresh water, your wastewater, which is here, and then also your boiler drain down point. Now your boiler, your drain down point, and your fresh water are all located on the inside of the vehicle. However, your wastewater is located on the outside of the vehicle, and it's in a tank that is underslung in the vehicle. To empty that, all you'll need to do is come down here, and you may be able to see it. It's a little bit difficult to see on the camera, just 1 minute. And just like that, you'll notice that you've got a handle here. All you've got to do is pull that towards you to drain down the wastewater, and push it again backwards to close the wastewater tank. I'd personally recommend leaving this tank open and leaving a bucket underneath there, just to ensure that there's no water in this tank, because as you can appreciate, if it is very, very cold, as this tank is underslung, it could potentially freeze. So I'd recommend leaving this open, especially in the colder months, and letting all the water trickle out into the bucket. That way you don't have any water in that tank. Obviously in the warmer months you're absolutely fine, but what goes for all of your drain down points is, once you've drained down the majority of the water on site, leave all of your tanks open, including your boiler and your fresh water, because as you're travelling home, the vibrations of the road will just ensure all that residual water makes its way out of the vehicle. But as I say, it's dead easy. Simply pull that lever and push it back to open and close it. Back up now, and next to the Trum event is your hookup point. So this is where you can get 230 volt hooked up to the vehicle. So 9 times out of 10 when you're on site, you'll have access to 230 volt electric. Simply hook up your cable like so, and that will charge your leisure battery and gain you access to anything 230 volt in the vehicle. Moving round to the back of the motorhome, you can see that you've got a bike rack fitted to this vehicle, along with a ladder. And then, as you can see, by opening up the rear doors, it will gain you access on the inside of the vehicle. So on one side you've got a locker here, which is for your gas. Now please bear in mind that when you're travelling, your gas should be turned off at the bottle. When you're stationary and you're ready to use the vehicle, you can of course turn that on at the bottle, and then you're good to go. You've also got these straps to securely fasten the gas bottles in when travelling. You'll notice that your gas regulator is this silver piece here, and all you'll need is a gas pigtail which will connect onto your gas regulator and feed straight into the bottle. That way you can just simply release the gas, as I mentioned, when you're stationary, and that will flow it through the vehicle, allowing you to operate your hobs and anything off the gas system. But please ensure that when travelling they are turned off at the bottle itself. Now on the other side you have another locker here. Opening this up, you can see it will gain you access to your cassette toilet. Before removing this, please ensure that the blade on the toilet is closed. Now I'll show you how to close that blade a little later on as we move throughout the vehicle. But ensure that blade is closed, and then you can come to remove the cassette. Now to actually remove the cassette, all you've got to do is pull up on this orange handle and slide the cassette out towards you. If that feels like it's getting jammed, you've probably most definitely left the blade open. So in that case, stop what you're doing, just check that that hasn't jammed and that is closed. If it does feel like it's jammed, people have been known to then force it further, and then it's cracked and braked, and that's when it becomes expensive, because you'll need a brand new cassette system and potentially a new blade mechanism. So just bear in mind, again, if it does feel like it's being forced, you're probably doing something wrong. Now, to drain this down, all you've got to do is pull it out, and I'll just pop it onto the ground for us now. And just like that, once it's out, to drain down, all you've got to do, or get rid of the waste, is move out the funnel like so, remove the yellow cap, and then pressing the yellow button on the top, that will release an internal vacuum, allowing you to empty the entire contents out of the cassette. You can put a bit of water in this just to swill it out, and if you're using blue fluid, all you've got to do is just pop it in the top of this funnel here, or this cap. There's a little measurement on there to indicate how much you need, and once you've done that, the cap can go back on and the funnel can go back into position. Once you've done that, the cassette is ready to put back in its tray, just through there, but you will notice that you've got a yellow valve here. This turns and twists, This should always stay in this position. There should be no need for you to turn this. This is what makes contact with the blade, which I mentioned earlier. So when you open the blade, it makes contact with this and opens the cassette, and vice versa. However, like I mentioned, this should always stay in this position. If this is off slightly, it won't go in. So please ensure it is in that position. And as simple as that, once you've emptied everything out, line it back up with the tray and slide the cassette back in until that yellow clip has clicked into position, and then you'll see that cassette isn't going anywhere. Now you'll also notice that you've got your tabletop here. There will be a leg somewhere in the vehicle. Now, not to cover everything on the inside yet, because we've still got a bit to do on the outside, but that is where the tabletop does store. And like I mentioned, there will be a leg somewhere in the vehicle, which you can use to then connect it into position. So moving on from the back and round to the side, you can see I've just closed the main habitation door here, because you can see that you've got your fridge vents, which are just located on this side of the vehicle. The fridge is a Dometic fridge, and this is where the fridge pulls all of its air from to cool the fridge. Now, if it is a hot day, especially today, it's quite a warm day, what I'd personally recommend is trying to keep this area under as much shade as possible, perhaps by pulling out the awning or turning the vehicle away from the sun. That will just allow the fridge to run a little bit more efficiently. You can also buy winter covers for these if you are storing the motorhome, should you want to. And then the final thing on this side of the vehicle is your Fiamma awning. Now, I will send you a separate video showing you how the awning operates. As you can imagine, I've only got the one hand, so it's a bit difficult to show you on the video. So I will send you that by a separate link. But what you can do here is you'll have somewhere in the motorhome a telescopic awning pole that will then connect onto here, and then you wind it out to let the two legs on the inside of the motorhome fall down and then take the weight to the awning. So it's dead easy. Now, one thing to remember, if it is a windy day, do not use the awning, take it back in. So it's quite a windy day today, so I'd personally recommend you not to use the awning, because if you do get any sort of wind or breeze underneath there, it can potentially rip the awning from the vehicle, potentially damaging your vehicle and others, so it's just not worth it. Another thing to bear in mind as well is, although the awning can be used when it's raining, you will need to at some point pull it out to get that awning dry, because obviously if it's left in there for a long time, it will lead to mould and rot, so just bear that in mind. Now that concludes the outside. We'll move on to the inside now. So you can see I've just opened up the main habitation door here, and you'll notice that straight away you've got a control panel here. This is actually the solar charge controller as indicated here, and this will regulate the amount of power that the solar panel is putting through. You've got an on button here, which will show you how much it's pulling through. And you've also got an isolator button here, which is this red switch here, which will turn everything on or off for the leisure battery. Dead easy, nice and simple to access. But to be honest, with your solar panel, you can just leave it on, leave it as it is, and that will just keep topping up that battery as it needs to. Okie dokie, so moving on to the inside of the motorhome. You can see that you've got your bench seat here, a single seat here and your bench seat to the left of me, which creates a really nice lounge, especially for a panel van. Now, underneath this bench seat, you have got access to the leisure battery, as well as a little bit of storage should you need to. And this is really if you're ever replacing the battery, but to be honest, it's really designed for our technicians when working on the vehicle. So you don't really need to access it that much. And as I mentioned, the isolator switch for that is on that other side, which is that red switch. Now, this area does actually turn into a really good sized bed. How it works is this front section slides across to here, which this creates a single, and you could use this one as a single as well. However, if you wanted to make it into a big double, all you've got to do is slide this area across to here, and this bed will then lay flat, or these seats rather will make flat to create a bed, and then you've got a big double bed for you to use. I'll do that for you now. All you've got to do is remove this little latch here, and that can then slide out all the way to here. Now I'll do this for you now, just 1 minute. And just like that, you can see we're now turned into a bed. As I mentioned, all I've done is pull that all the way across, laid the cushions flat, then pulled this ledge out, which slides all the way across to here, and this bench seat can then lay flat here. The armrests then simply tuck in at the back here where there's a little bit of a gap, and then the idea is you'll have your pillows onto here, and then you'll sleep across the vehicle. As you can see, it's a cracking size double bed, plenty of space. If you did want to use it as two singles, you could actually swivel these two front seats and use them as your leg rests, so you can sleep with one head here, another person here, sleeping across, lengthways down the vehicle. And just like that, you can see we're now back to your lounge area. Going back over to this single seat, if I do remove this backrest, be a little bit easier to show you. You have got a control setting here, which says Webasto on there, and this will control everything throughout the vehicle in terms of your heating. So this will control basically your vehicle's heating. All you've got to do is turn this dial on here, and you can see there's a little triangle on the inside which glows up green. A little bit difficult to show you on the video, but what that will do is turn your heating on and will allow everything to run. Before that will operate, however, you do need to come up to this point here, because you can see that you've got your main control panel, and you need to turn obviously your electrics on by selecting this first button here. And you can see by doing that, that will then allow you to run the Webasto heater. Now, like I mentioned, this is a diesel heater. It will provide heating for the vehicle itself, not the water heating, but the actual vehicle itself. And it runs off the diesel. Now, it has its own exhaust system, so you don't need the engine running, of course, for that to operate. So it's quite a smart system with that in mind, and it works really efficiently. It doesn't use much diesel at all. So it's dead simple. When it gets a little bit hot, you may want to turn this down. Now, what often happens is when you initially put this on, your lights around the vehicle may begin to flicker. The reason for that is there's quite a harsh pull in power that is needed to get this up to temperature, so you get a bit of a power surge. So don't be alarmed. After about 15 minutes or so, they will start to calm down and stop flickering. Now, coming back up to the main control panel, as I've told you, up here you've got your main on button, and that will turn all your 12 volt systems on. Now, as we are plugged into electric, you'll notice that we've got your 230 volt lighting up here, which indicates that we are getting power. Underneath, you've then got your water levels. If I hold that, it will tell you our levels for the wastewater and then the fresh water. Let me click that again. Fresh water is the S1, S2/S3 is for the wastewater. You can see we've got a little bit of fresh water in and nothing in the wastewater tank, and it does actually show you that up here and indicates that the S2, which is the wastewater tank, has nothing in, thanks to the indication that is red. The S3 tank is for an additional tank if you ever had one fitted, and it's not fitted to this vehicle, so just bear that in mind. Moving along, you've then got your pump button. Click that on to turn the pump, and you may have heard that activating. So you can turn that on when you've got water in the vehicle. Bear in mind, you only want to turn this on when there's water in the vehicle. You don't want to run the pump without any water, or else you will simply burn out the pump. But providing you've got water in the system, all you've got to do is click that button on and then go over to your taps, including your shower, and you can turn that on and turn it to hot. Now, by turning that on and turning it to hot, what it will do is it will pull fresh water from the fresh water tank into the boiler and then out of the tap. It will spurt and splutter, and then when it's running steadily, you've primed your system for your hot water. Once you've done that, flick it over to cold and it will do the exact same. It will spurt and splutter, and then when it's running steadily, you've primed your system. Bear in mind that the boiler will hold about 10 litres of water, so it's going to take a bit of time to fill that system up, but then you'll be good to go. It will be nice and primed and ready for you to use. Now, once you've done that, you can actually leave your pump on, because each of your taps have got something called a micro switch, which will activate and deactivate the pump whenever you need it. So dead easy. The only time you need to turn that pump off is when you've got no water in the vehicle, or else you will burn out the pump. And as I say, you need to do that for the taps, including the shower. And then coming back over to the control panel, you've then got a little light switch for the inside lights of the vehicle, and I believe you've got a little door light on the side as well, which can turn that on and activate the door light. You'll notice that that then turns all of your lights on and will light up the entire cab. And that is your main control panel. Dead easy, dead simple. Next to that, you've then got a little bit of storage in here. It's a nice little cubby hole. And then moving back into the lounge, you've got some storage up at the top. And then we're back to your seating. Now, through removing the side bench seats, all you've got to do is pull out this once again, these slats. Take away the slats from the back, which creates the base of the bed, and remove this insert. And this will gain you access to your fresh water tank and also the trimmer boiler itself. It all looks quite complicated, but it's really easy to use. So to drain down the fresh water, all you've got to do is remove that red cap there by simply turning it, and there'll be a little bung in that tank that you can simply pull and empty the entire tank out. So it's dead easy, dead simple. Once you want to seal that, simply put that little bung back into position, and then you're good to go. And like I mentioned, on all your drain down points, once you're not using the vehicle, drain everything down to ensure there's no water remaining in the motorhome. Now moving on from the freshwater tank and into your boiler, you've got your boiler which is on the right hand side here. The main thing that you need to know is of course draining it down. Everything else can be is only really needed to know by the technician. You can see you've got a pump there in the corner and a couple of bits of pipe. You've also got another quick drain down point here. You can flick this on by turning it, and that will drain down some of the pipe work in the vehicle, which tend to be from the boiler beyond. But to drain the boiler itself, all you've got to do is located underneath this little metal bracket is a little yellow toggle. You might be able to see it on the video. It's a little bit difficult to show you on the video, so we can show you in person. But just underneath here, I'll try and angle it, you can see that you've got a little toggle. Now at the moment in the down position it is closed. To open that, all you've got to do is stick your hand down here and pull up on the toggle, like so. When it's sticking up, it is open, and as I mentioned, when you flick it down, it is closed, and that will allow you to drain down the entire boiler system. Dead easy, no problem. Now I'll leave that shut for you, and I'll give you another view of what that should look like when it's closed. As you can see, it's now closed, and then you're good to go. And like I mentioned, please ensure that everything is drained out of the boiler when you are not using the motorhome. And just like that, that concludes all your drain down points in the vehicle. You can see I've just slid this back now, just to show you two things. You've got a little bit of usable storage underneath here should you want to access it. It's quite a nice deep area. And then finally, just to conclude your heating, we've got the heating system for the boiler itself. So we've spoken obviously about heating the vehicle, and this is purely done off the diesel tank. But if you're wanting to heat the water, it is purely gas. So this little button here, when it's in the middle, it is off. So when it's pointing to this little zero icon or O, that indicates that it's off. To turn on, you can either flick it up or all the way down. And it depends what you're wanting to run it off and how efficient you want it to run. If you flick it up, that will mean that the water gets up to about 50 degrees. If you flick it down, that will mean that the water gets up to about 70 degrees. So it depends on your situation. 9 times out of 10, you'll stick it on 70 degrees just to get it up to temperature. And obviously when you're washing up and anything like that, you will want it on the hotter setting. When you're taking a shower, however, you'll want it on 50 degrees. You don't want to be burning yourself, so you can just simply switch that to 50 degrees to then heat the hot water. And like I mentioned on the outside, please ensure that that vent is removed from the side of the motorhome before using this system. But I'll leave it in the middle so it's off, so the boiler isn't going to heat. Bear in mind as well, you do want to have your control panel, your freshwater tank completely filled up with water before turning this on, or else you will burn out the system. So ensure when you're on site, you're filled up with water, fill up your fresh water tank from the outside, Prime the system, so pull it through the boiler and out of your tap, and then you can turn on your water heating. Now just above the couch as well, you'll see that you've got on all your windows a fly screen, which is dead easy to use, and then you've got these curtains in the lounge area which will pull along just to black out the cab. To open these windows up, press in on the red button like so on all your latches, and that will open up the window. You can then open it up and let that click into position to allow a little bit of airflow through. Please ensure that when travelling these are completely sealed. To seal them, push them all the way up like so, and then seal them into position. You can put these on venting as well, just to allow a little bit of airflow through, but like I mentioned, ensure that these are all correctly sealed before travelling. And again, to seal them, press that red button in to allow you to seal it into position. So now we're moving towards the back of the vehicle. You'll notice that you've got space for a TV should you want one on here, along with a 230 volt electric point to plug it into, or a 12 volt point depending on what you're supplied with on the campsite. Up at the top you've then got a status aerial. This is a booster box for the aerial, and to turn it on and off you can flick through the options there. Just this little dial here. I'd leave it on personally, it doesn't really draw anything off the battery. I guess it depends on whether you've got a TV hooked up. You can then change the range, which is low range, to the maximum range should you want to, and then you will get a little red light which will indicate once that's all plugged in. Moving through to the kitchen area, we're in the rear of the vehicle now. You've got your 3 gas burners. Of course you'll need your gas on for that to operate, along with a really good bit of storage underneath here. You've got a grill here and then plenty of slide out drawers. Now what I wanted to show you is just directly underneath the sink. You've got a bit of storage in here, but you've also got these red taps. These red taps are what's known as isolator valves, and they allow us to isolate certain areas of the vehicle when working on the motorhome. You don't need to touch these, leave these as they are. They're really only for the technicians, as I mentioned, when working on the vehicle. They help us isolate the vehicle when we're doing various gas checks and whatnot. So leave them as they are, and then you're good to go. And opposite here, you can see that you've got a bit more storage, and there's the table leg that I was mentioning that can just connect into the front there, which will give you a place to eat. There's some hanging space in there as well. And then directly above that, you've got your fridge. So the fridge is dead simple. It's a 3-way fridge, so there's 3 ways to power it. So you can either run it off your 12 volt leisure battery, your 230 volt electric point, or you can run it off gas, depending on what you want to select. Now, more often than not, when you're plugged in on site, you're going to want to run it off electric, and simply do that by pressing the green button up. I personally wouldn't recommend you leaving this on 12 volts, as it will draw so much power it can potentially leave you without any 12 volt power. So if you're wild camping, I'd run it off gas, which you can do by simply turning this on, and that will then begin to ignite and put the gas into the fridge. The only time really to run it off your 12 volt leisure battery is when you're travelling, because this vehicle has got a built-in alternator which will send power from the vehicle battery into the leisure battery, which will then allow you to power the fridge. So I'd personally go that way. If you are running it off gas, you've got an option between the temperature and how much gas you want to obviously use. And if you're running it off electric, you can do the same on here, so you can change the temperature of the fridge. And with the fridge open, got a small little fridge as well as a freezer box up in the top right. And then finally, in the rear of the motorhome, you've then got a really nice washroom area. Now we've spoken obviously about priming the system for your shower and your taps, so that is the same for that. But the actual toilet, we did mention there's a couple things to know. So one thing to know, that when you're using the toilet, you want to have the blade open, so all the waste drops into the cassette. Now the blade that I keep talking about is this piece of plastic here. To open the blade, pull across, and that will open the cassette and again allow you to drop all the waste into the cassette. Once you've done that, click the blue button which is on the top there. That will activate the flush, and that will flush out the toilet bowl into the cassette. Once you've done that, close the cassette for two reasons. The main reason being is it does stop odours from escaping from the cassette, but the second main reason is it will get you into the habit of having that cassette closed, so when you come to remove the cassette to empty it, it's not going to get jammed. Now, as I mentioned, you've got a blue button on here which will activate your flush. Please bear in mind you do need your pump on for that to operate. And just like that, that concludes the handover video on this Trigano Tribute. I hope you enjoyed.